I'd love to call this board meeting of the Air Quality Management District to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Carr. Cruz.
Here.
Ross. Here. Rivera. Hanson.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Lee. McGlashan.
Here.
Natoli. Peters.
Here.
Cerna. Starsky. Terry.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Will you read the statement, please?
Yes, I will. This meeting of the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District is cablecast live without interruption on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse. This meeting is being closed captioned and will be webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will be repeated on Saturday, March 26th at 2 p.m. on Channel 14. Members of the audience wishing to address the board may fill out a speaker form located on the table at the back of the chambers and give it to the clerk. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Also, at this time, please silence your cell phones until the conclusion of today's meeting.
Thank you, Nancy. Mr. Cruz, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is the Air Pollution Control Officer's report, and Larry Green will give the report.
I have a couple of things to cover here. First is to introduce John Furtado.
Your microphone on there? Oh, there you go.
Just came out.
Is it on? Just came on?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Try again.
I can't tell here whether it's on or not. We're happy to announce John Furtado as our new District Air Quality Instrument Specialist, too. John.
Welcome, John.
He comes to us, to the district, from the California Air Resources Board with over 5 years of experience as an instrument technician. We're really happy to get his experience over here to our district. He's also worked as a line maintenance technician for approximately 17 years with NEC Electronics, now known as TSI Semiconductors in Roseville. He received his associate's degree in electronics from San Jose City College and has a biomedical equipment technology certificate from American River College. Welcome to the district, John. The next thing I would like to mention to the board is I have included in your packet the executive summary of 2016 priority issues for the Capital to Capital trip. Rather than have 3 or 4 papers that they're carrying this year, they wanted to put together 3 issues and then sort of summarize a whole range of papers together into those. I think it's been a very good conversation between the chamber staff and the various team members and team leaders out across the region that are going on the trip. And you can see here infrastructure, people, strategic objectives. And I've highlighted for you 3 or 2 places here where we had influence and where we think that this really supports initiatives that are important to the Air District. So we're very excited as always. A number of you will be on the air quality team, and we will be having a team meeting, I think, what did we say, the 4th of April, to pull our team together, to have a final meeting, talk about our issue papers, to get packets and so on. As always, the air quality team is run through the Clean Air Partnership. Valley Vision manages that, and we have a very solid team. We work throughout the year for Cap to Cap so that when we go there, we have a really solid group of meetings and issues and such that support the Air District mission here in Sacramento. That's all I have.
Did you want to say anything about the Yosemite Conference?
I will be happy to introduce that. I think I have my board members who want to say something about that. The conference was extraordinary. I've been to that probably 4 or 5 times now, and I found that every single panel there was really informative. And as the conference always touches Air District issues that are important to us, it touches many other issues in an expanded role for elected officials. It's for elected officials, and I think some of you may mention key things. I know I've already talked this morning to Jeff about one of the issues that came up there that was really interesting about homelessness.
Welcome, Mr. Guerra. Mr. Harris, would you like to say anything?
So the local government commission conference in Yosemite was my first year attending, and I'd have to say that the learning curve was fantastic. There were ideas presented on all aspects of sustainable communities, from EIFDs to homeless housing to groundwater recharging. So the spectrum was very broad. I'd have to say that every minute I was there, I was extremely attentive. I came home with a lot of information to digest, and it's still sort of filtering down. But it was all really useful. And so that's very exciting. As an elected, I think it really opened my eyes to a lot of possibilities, new programs to work on. And of course, it was a lot of fun driving up there with Larry and getting to know our officer a lot better. He's a great guy, by the way.
Coming back was quite interesting, wasn't it?
Actually, we got out just in time. We didn't spin out. We didn't get stuck in the snow.
He
It
loved
worked
you
out
so
pretty
much,
well.
Larry, he rode back with me.
What did you get into?
We had the same experience, but it was quite interesting coming back.
Yeah. All in all, I think it was another great example of continuing education for board members like us. I enjoyed it. There was a name badge for a Patrick Kennedy, but it turned out to be a different Patrick Kennedy than our Patrick Kennedy. But I hope that's a precursor to more people coming, and thank you for the continued support for board members to do those activities. Madam Clerk.
Okay, the next item is the consent calendar. However, there are a couple of revisions. One revision is to item number 3, correction to the language and the title of the resolution. The title said fiscal year 13-14, and it really should say 14-15. And then for item number 5, there is an attachment 3, Exhibit A, that was revised, and the sole change was to add a requirement of 2 years of full-time paid supervisory experience noted under the minimum qualifications, education and experience. And this experience requirement is consistent with comparable positions at other local agencies. So those are the 2 revisions.
All right. Director McGlashan.
Yes, I'd just like to record a no vote on item 1.
Would you like to pull that for a separate vote?
No.
Or
No, I have no comment. I just want to
Okay.
record a no vote.
Okay.
procedurally, if we move the whole consent calendar, can we show a no vote on one of the items?
Yes.
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Okay. All right, with that, I don't see anyone else signed up to speak. Do we have a motion?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Harris, seconded by Mr. Cruz. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? All right. Thank you all. Next item.
Next item is under the staff section. It's item number 7, receive and file report on AQMD's health risk management program.
And I wanted to speak to the board real quickly about 7, 8, and 9 and explain how these fit together. These are all about the health risk management program, toxic risk program here at the district, and this is an extraordinarily complex issue. And what I hope we have done is put this together, 3 presentations which make good sense to you and advance your knowledge about what the program is about here at the district. The first presentation will be about an overview of our program. The second presentation will be a yearly report that we're required to give by the state, and it requires you to have a public hearing, open a public hearing, and close a public hearing, and then accept the report. And the third item, number 9, is a change to the program necessitated by changes in the state guidance. And we're required to follow state guidance. The state has changed a few elements of that, and you will see during the presentation why we need to bring this forward. Previously, the board has approved these procedures, and therefore we have to, if we're making changes to those procedures, we have to bring it back to the board for your approval on the changes. So that's how the order will go. And Jorge de Guzman will give the first presentation on number 7.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Before I start, I want to apologize. Just getting over a cold, or at least I think I'm getting over the cold. But if I break into coughs or need to take a big breath, it's just that.
He sounds much better than he did 2 days ago when I saw this.
I was not able to
we were
speak
all
at all.
sitting. We were all sitting across the room from him.
So my presentation today is an overview of our toxics program and some of the changes that we've had to make in response to the changes that were made by the state in the way that we do risk assessments. But before I jump into that, I want to just go over some of the terminology I'm going to be using. I think it will make it a little easier to understand and follow my next slides. First thing is cancer risk. By definition, when we talk about carcinogens, there is no safe level established. So we always talk about cancer risk in terms of probability, in chances per million. And just because of that, because there is no actual safe level. When we talk about non-carcinogenic substances, toxic substances, there are levels, and those are called reference exposure levels. And those are levels below which we don't expect to have any adverse health effects. And those, again, I call reference exposure levels, or you'll hear me say RELs. And hazard index is the sum of the RELs or the concentration over RELs for the different substances. So when we talk about risk, cancer risk is chances per million. When we talk about non-cancer risk, you'll hear me say hazard index, which is the concentration over the REL for the different substances. And HARP-2 is a program that we use for calculating health risk. And in the past, we've used a program called HARP. HARP-2 is the 2015 version, and it just incorporates the new risk assessment guidelines that the state has issued. So with that, I want to start by looking at the effectiveness of the toxics programs in California. Since 1990, population has gone up over 30%, vehicles over 30%, economy has gone up over 80%, and yet we have managed to reduce risk by over 75%. This slide shows the significant reduction by different substances. The only substance that is missing on this table that's significant is diesel exhaust, and I was just not able to find specific data for the different years on that. This slide shows more of a regional comparison. You see here for Sacramento up on top, since 1990 we have reduced risk by over 76%, or today's risk is more than 4 times lower than it was in 1990. Very successful programs, and these are both a combination of state, federal, and local programs for mobile sources as well as stationary sources. On the stationary sources, all the local, state, and federal requirements are really handled at the local level. We have the jurisdiction over all those programs. Today, I'm going to be speaking primarily over these 3 programs: the Toxics Permitting Program, the Air Toxics Hotspots Program, and the AB 3205 program, or the school notifications. I'm going to start with the Air Toxics Hotspots Program, or also known as AB 2588. This program was enacted in 1987, and it required facilities to do an inventory and calculate the health risk, and districts had to establish the significance levels. We established 10 in a million for cancer and 1 for acute and chronic hazard index. And facilities that exceeded that had to notify the public. And that's where the program ended, notification to the public. Then in 1992, SB 1731 came along and said, well, notifying the public is not enough. You also need to reduce your emissions down to an acceptable level. Then in 1999, SB 25, Children's Environmental Health Protection Act, required the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment to take a look at the way we were doing risk assessments and determine if we were being protective enough for children's health. And OE has spent the next 16 years developing technical support documents and evaluating the different chemicals and their impact on children. And finally, in 2015, they came up with the new risk assessment guidelines. These guidelines show a substantially higher calculated cancer risk than the previous guidelines. And according to the Health and Safety Code, we have to use the OIHA guidelines when doing risk assessments for the air toxics hotspots program. So, and according to those guidelines, the new guidelines, the risk goes up by about 2.7 times what it used to be. So what previously was a risk of 10 under the new guidelines could be 27. Quite a significant increase. Then in July of 2015, the Air Resources Board, in conjunction with CAPCOA, came up with a risk management guidance document for stationary sources. And this was much more comprehensive than the OIHA guidelines. The OIHA guidelines were only targeting 2588, the air toxics hotspots program. This new document was addressed 2588 as well as permitting. So we're incorporating the changes suggested in this document. One of those is the use of HARP-2, which incorporates the new OIHA guidelines for doing risk assessments. It incorporates the new air dispersion model and also uses the latest potency factors and reference exposure levels. And the other change that we're making is on the inhalation is we're going to be using the 95th percentile daily breathing rate for children under age 2 and the 80th percentile for children or general public of age 2 and above. And the other change, relatively small, that we're making is we're adding a 0 to the thresholds to, really represent what we wanted to represent, which is, for example, in the case of cancer risk, a cancer risk of greater than 10 is considered significant and requires notification. The way it's currently written, without the decimal place, it could be interpreted, for example, that a 9.6 rounds to a 10 and therefore requires notification. And that was not the intent. So we're clarifying that. So overall, for Sacramento, all these changes result in a risk increase of approximately 1.5 to 2 times what we were previously calculating for cancer. For acute and chronic health risk, well, we don't expect to see any changes based on the new guidance. Here's a timeline of the 2588 program. This is a full cycle of the program. This is assuming that we start requesting people to submit their inventories in 2017 based on 2016 operations. The thing that's important here is to note that before we get to the 2019 date, we have to come up with a good way of communicating this information to the public. As I mentioned on my previous slides, the risk has gone down substantially. California has had a very successful program reducing cancer risk. But now, because we're changing the way we're calculating risk, it appears that people are being exposed to higher risk. So it's going to be a very complicated message, and ourselves, along with CAPCOA and other groups, will be working on coming up with a good message or a good way to present that to the public.
And Jorge, if I might say, yes. Oh,
Yeah, I had a
Director
question.
Tully, do you have a question?
Yeah,
I'm
thank
sorry,
you,
Larry, to
Chair.
interrupt you.
Yeah, Larry, if you want to go ahead, but I wanted to ask a question of Mr. Guzman when you're
okay.
done.
The one comment I wanted to make here was that throughout this process, going back to the year before the release of the ARB documents, the CAPCOA board became very concerned about this particular issue, that we had significantly reduced the amount of toxics in the atmosphere over those years, and yet the calculated risk was going to be higher based on a new way of calculating the risk. And we did not want the public to get the wrong message about that. And industry was very adamant about not wanting the public to get the wrong message about that because they feel they've done a very good job over the years, and we agree with that. So we worked to delay the release of that information until we had a way of communicating that reliably to the public. And the release in 2015 was a release that was based on a year's worth of work at CAPCOA, ARB, and with the industry groups, and also with environmental groups. We met with both sides of the house in that regard, and when everybody was comfortable with the way we were going to do that, then we released that document. And this piece here is a continuing effort between the environmental groups and the industry and CAPCOA and ARB to really be sure we have this message to them, because what we don't want to do is have a bunch of people upset about this inordinately and calling the public and papers and things like that. We want the real story to be out there, and as you see, it's a complex story, so we have to be very thoughtful about how we do this. And we're continuing to work on this particular piece very closely with our partners, both from the environmental groups and the industry groups, so that we have this nailed down by the time we have to get to this.
Okay, thanks. My question is, so the high-risk facilities, examples of those are service stations in that. This is a lot of times proximate to schools or where you have concentrations of young people, so it can be schools, daycare centers, I guess, maybe parks and other facilities. But so what are the high-risk facilities that are going to be the ones that are going to have to screen for this as they come in for their permits?
We're going to cover that later, aren't we?
We're going to cover that on the 2588 presentation this second.
Okay, because I'm not reading ahead, so you're going to go through all that.
We're going to show you exactly where they are here and what kind of facilities they are. Okay. And I will also say that as we worked to this presentation, we've already had a workshop and we've engaged with our high-risk facilities in Sacramento County. And we work with them so that they're aware of what's going on, and so that we started thinking about a strategy, and we think our businesses and our industry in Sacramento County are on a path to be fine with this program. So we're not concerned about any particular location, but it will be a communications issue more than anything else.
Yeah, with respect to gas stations, there's three things that are lowering the risk from gas stations that we have considered. One of them is the emission factors is changing, is getting lower. The amount of benzene in gasoline is lower than we had estimated. And thirdly is there's another option when we do the modeling now called spatial averaging, where rather than taking the concentration at one specific point, we average it over a square area. And all those three combined, when we have looked at the impact that's going to have in gas stations, it looks like all gas stations are going to be okay.
Well, you recall, I'm sure, and so did you, Larry, when a few years back, they proposed ARCO station at Carolina Bradshaw, now in Supervisor Kennedy's district, but with Bradshaw Christian School and concerns of neighbors, and I think it was one of the rare times at that point, at least, when I think that 2015 law hadn't been approved yet, but we had quite a controversy and quite a turnout a couple evenings with those meetings, and there was a lot of press coverage because people had concern about the gas station for a number of reasons, but they were using this process and a notification behind it as being one of the abilities for them, certainly, to try to stop what they felt was going to be a problem in their neighborhood. So.
And this new number played a role in the Curtis Park gas station issue.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Any more questions on this subject? Because I'm going to jump into something different.
Let's go.
All right. So next is the permitting program. And for the permitting, one of the things that we do is if a facility exceeds a threshold of 1 in a million for cancer or a threshold of 1 for hazard index, either acute or chronic, it has to install best available control technology for toxics, or TBACT. And the changes that we're making here is, again, we're adding a 0 to, I guess, be more specific as to what our threshold is. And the more significant change is we're changing from facility-wide to project-specific, and we're relying on the air toxics hotspots program, the one that I just talked about, for making sure that the facility-wide risk is within the acceptable range. And in the definition of TBAC, or Toxic Best Available Control Technology, we are being a little more specific as to what we mean by number 2, technologically feasible. We're saying now that is a standard set by NESHAP, which is a national emission standard for hazardous air pollutant. It's a federal regulation for toxics. Any standard set by a California ATCM, which is a California regulation for toxics, or a standard set as BACT. And then we have an upper bound of 10 in a million, or a hazard index of 1, meaning that if a facility exceeds that, they're typically not allowed to, we wouldn't grant a permit except for some specific cases, as mentioned in footnote 3 here. Again, the change we're making here is going from facility-wide to project-specific and relying on the hotspots program to handle the facility-wide risk. And with respect to footnote 3 here, back in the late 80s, this was added to our toxics policy, and as essentially primarily for the Superfund sites, where not cleaning up the site might have resulted in a health risk much greater than cleaning up the site, even if cleaning up the site meant exceeding the 10 in a million. So for that reason, that section was added, allowing the APCO to make that decision. So under that clause, the APCO can allow a risk between 10 and 100 in a million. And again, we are just adding a 0 to mean what we mean to say. And one change we're making to this section is we're adding a 30-day public notice and comment period before the APCO makes that decision, and allowing the APCO to take into consideration those comments before deciding whether to approve or not the project. And again, for the permitting program, we're going to be using the same procedures as for the 2588 program for calculating health risks. It's important that we compare apples to apples and have both programs use the same process for calculating risk. And lastly is the public notification near schools. Health and Safety Code section 42301.6a requires us to notify the parents of children that go to a school or any address within 1,000 feet of a project that is within 1,000 feet of a school and is going to emit toxics. The way the regulation is written, it says emits hazardous air emissions, and we're not really exactly sure what that means, what level, because everything that we permit emits hazardous emissions to some degree. It could be nanograms, but there is some degree of hazardous emissions emitted. So we're interpreting this to mean at a level that results in a health risk above the de minimis level. So we're establishing a de minimis level and say, if this is not going to cause any significant health risk, or we're sure that it's not going to impact health in any way, there's no need to alarm the public. So the intent of the state law is to notify, but not to alarm the public of if they're being exposed to some health risk. And then there's another section under the same regulation that says that the regulation or the need to notify does not apply if it's going to result in a reduction or equivalent amount of air contaminants. So if we interpret that literally, if you're emitting a pound of formaldehyde and you want to replace it with a pound of dioxins, you wouldn't have to notify. Never mind that dioxin will impact health well over 1 million times more than a pound of formaldehyde. So we're changing that to will result in a reduction or equivalent health risk. Again, believe that the intent of the regulation is to notify the public when they're being exposed to a higher health risk. And with that, I conclude my presentation. And
I don't have any board members signed up to speak. We do have one member of the public signed up for both items together. Ms. Wood, would you like to wait until the next item ends in order to? Okay, so let's do that. Oh, sorry. Director Kennedy punched up. Director Kennedy.
No, I just want to, not so much a question, but to say that I really appreciate the fact that when given the opportunity of raising the bar in interpreting where it's vague, that you did that across the board. And I think that's wise and prudent. So.
All right, thank you. Do you guys want to act on this one, or do you want to do them together after the next one since they're sort of related?
I think this is a receive and file.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought there was a.
The next
All right.
one is
All right.
open and close a hearing.
And then the one following is
Sorry, I thought we had moved on to the. All right. Let's go.
So next item is under public hearing. It's item number 8, conduct a public hearing to discuss the content and significance of the 2015 report on the Air Toxics Hotspots Information and Assessment Act.
And Matt Baldwin will do this presentation, and you'll get to see where some of the locations are for the facilities in this.
Okay, and I have
Yeah,
here's
so get it up.
presentation. So, good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board.
There you go.
I'm here today to present the annual report on the Air Toxics Hotspots Information and Assessment Act. Section 44363 of the Health and Safety Code requires that the report be presented and discussed as part of a public hearing. After opening the hearing, receiving comments, and closing the hearing, staff request that the board receive and file a report. So what is AB 2588, or the Air Toxics Hotspots Program? So it was enacted in 1987 to inventory routine and predictable emissions of toxic air emissions, to assess the health risk of these toxic emissions, notify the affected public, and eventually reduce the risk. And then who is subject? So there are two categories, core facilities and industry-wide facilities. Core facilities are those that either release more than 10 tons per year of criteria pollutants, or those that release less than 10 tons of criteria pollutants and are listed in Appendix E of the hotspots guidelines. And those that are listed in Appendix E are those that are commonly release air toxics, such as asphalt batch plants, sand and gravel operations, commercial printing, fiberglass manufacturing. And then we have industry-wide facilities, and those are facilities that are generally smaller. The district is required to prepare the inventory and health risk assessment for these facilities, and in order to be considered an industry-wide facility, the facility must emit less than 10 tons per year of criteria pollutants. The emissions must be easily and generically characterized. The facilities must share a common SIC code. The majority of these are small businesses, and then individual compliance with the program would impose severe economic hardships. And examples of these are gas stations, dry cleaners, chrome platers, diesel engines. So what is the process? The first process is the emissions inventory plan and report, and this is just us requesting the emissions inventory from facilities and estimating the emissions. Following that is prioritization, and we prioritize facilities by calculating a score based on the emission rate and the potency or toxicity of the pollutant. And then once we get the priority score, we categorize it into low, intermediate, or a high priority facility. Low priority facilities become exempt from the program. Intermediate facilities remain in the program, and we require a 4-year update. And then high priority facilities are required to submit a health risk assessment. For those that are required to submit a health risk assessment, the assessment must evaluate the dispersion of the air toxics, the potential for human exposure, and estimate the cancer and non-cancer health risks. And then once we have a health risk assessment, we move on to risk categorization, and we consult with the Office of Environmental Health and Hazard Assessment to review the assessment and recategorize the facility. So even if the priority score is high, their actual health risk assessment may show an intermediate or a low, or bring them to a low category. So if it does show that it's a low priority or a low health risk assessment, then they're out of the program. If they bump down to intermediate, then we require the 4-year update. And if they're still high after an approved health risk assessment, then we move on to public notification. So the high-risk facilities must notify all individuals exposed to the significant health risks within 90 days of the determination. And then the district and facility must conduct a public meeting within 30 days of the notification to provide information on the health risk assessment and to answer any questions. And then after the notification, the facility is required to submit a risk reduction audit and plan. And this plan gives the facility 5 years to reduce their risks to below a significant level. And then if under certain circumstances they're granted an additional 5 years, if it's technologically infeasible if they can't meet it in 5 years. So what are our core facilities? So we have several facilities around the county that are considered core facilities. All of them are right now below 10 in a million. The blue ones all have an approved health risk assessment. The red ones do not have an approved health risk assessment. They've submitted everything, but we're still working with ourselves and OEHA to get those approved. And then the green ones submitted an approved health risk assessment, were determined to be below 1 in a million or not pose a significant risk, so they're now out of the program. And now moving on to the industry-wide facilities. First off is gas stations. So we have a lot of gas stations in the district. All of them are currently below 10 in a million, and several are below 5 in a million. And this is a distribution of those facilities and their corresponding risk. The next industry-wide category is dry cleaners. We currently only have 2 dry cleaners that use perchloroethylene, which is the driver for cancer risk among dry cleaners. We have, and in accordance with the dry cleaning airborne toxic control measure, they're required to phase out the use of PERC either by 2020 or 2021, which is based on 15 years after the manufacture of the machine. Then next is chrome platers. We have three chrome platers in the district, and all of them are currently under 10 in a million. And then for diesel engines, I didn't put up a slide because we have so many engines, but we reviewed 740 engines, and all of them were less than 10 in a million.
Could you go back to the chrome plating for a second? Director Terry was pointing out Chrome Craft, and there are many multiples more.
Yeah, it looks about 9 times more than number 2. Is there a reason? Considering that's in my city, I'm a little interested.
I think they're
close to my city, I guess.
Their production is higher. So the chrome emissions are generated when you're plating and you get chrome mist coming off of the plating tanks. And so that disperses out, and
right. But I'm assuming that's the same process for all of them, in some way. Right. Is there a reason why is this just a much larger facility than the rest of them?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Is there a way to bring their number down? That's a better question, other than reducing production.
I'd have to check. There are some
because they're right at the threshold. I mean, like
right. There are some chemical surfactants that reduce the amount of bubbling during plating operations.
Maybe that's some additional information that you can share with us in the future. It just kind of jumped out, and so actually, at first glance I thought it was in Rancho, but it's in the unincorporated area. But that just seems so much higher than the other 2 facilities.
So we'll give you a presentation about that particular facility since it's in your in your
just report back. Yeah,
that's fine.
Okay. And then, like I said, we reviewed 740 diesel engines, and all of them were below 10 in a million. So an example of the process, Mercy General Hospital, when we initially screened them, their cancer risk was 27.8 in a million based on their diesel engines. We requested a health risk analysis and approved the health risk analysis, and it showed that the cancer risk was 5.96 in a million. So instead of Mercy being categorized as high and going through the notification process, now they're classified as an intermediate facility and are required to update every 4 years. Any questions or comments from the board?
I don't see anyone punched up. I know that our public commenter was willing to wait until after item 9. Okay. So let's, do we want to take action on this?
I think you need to have a public hearing, open a public hearing. And then.
No, I know, but we could do them as 2 separate votes after the next presentation, or if somebody wants to make a motion.
It just says conduct a public hearing.
I'm sorry?
It just says conduct a public hearing.
Yes. So we have to close the public hearing and take it. Okay, and move the item.
Move the item.
All right.
Second.
We didn't have the public hearing yet.
That was the public hearing, right?
We have no speakers, particularly on number 8.
No.
Yeah. You open and close it,
Yeah.
and that's all you have to do.
All right.
Move to close the public hearing and move the item.
Thanks.
Did we actually open it?
And we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? All right. Next item.
Next item is item number 9, conduct a public hearing, and 1, adopt a resolution approving the amendments to the normalization factors and prioritization categories in the procedure for prioritizing facilities subject to the Air Toxics Hotspots Information and Assessment Act of 1987, and 2, determine that the amendments to the prioritization procedures are exempt from CEQA.
So you all will be toxics experts by the time today is over. So, gonna follow on Matt's presentation. When the first step for us as the district is to do the prioritization in the process, where we categorize facilities into the high, medium, and low. When we do that, we look at the amounts of toxics that are being emitted, the toxicity of those substances, their distance to receptors, be it a residence or a business, and we multiply those by a normalization factor that brings that number to a level that is comparable to what we would expect if we were to do a risk assessment. So now that the risk assessment procedures have changed, the normalization factor no longer represents what is supposed to represent. So a score of 10, which used to mean that you could expect to get a cancer risk of 10 if you were to do a risk assessment before. Under the new procedure, it could be a risk of 25. So what we are proposing is to change the normalization factor from 1,700 to 7,700. This is the number that was recommended by the CAPCOA Toxics Committee and approved by CAPCOA as what the number should be changed to. The other change that we're making is when the program started, and in accordance to our existing prioritization guidelines, we looked at the high priority facilities first, and then based on the results of that, we ended up requiring risk assessments for some of the facilities in the medium category, but not all of them. So in the medium category, if the score was less than 10, we just required a 4-year update. If it was greater or equal to 10, we treated it as if it were a high facility. In other words, we required them to do a risk assessment. So what we're proposing is to change the intermediate or medium category from 1 to 100 to 10. To 1 to 10, sorry, and the high category from greater than 100 to greater than or equal to 10, and again putting the 0 there for rounding purposes. So the result of it would be a flow that is much cleaner. It's the same effect, but it's cleaner, and it's also consistent with the CAPCOA guidelines that were developed in, I believe it was 1991. And that's all I have. They seem like relatively small changes, but as Larry mentioned, this is a board-adopted document, so we are requesting you that you open a public hearing and approve the amendments, and also make the finding that the amendments are exempt from CEQA.
Thank you. We have one member of the public signed up to speak, Ms. Wood.
Vicky. For you.
Okay. I don't want to touch it. You can
I blame you. For you. How's that?
Okay. Chair Hansen, the board, my name is Becky Wood. I'm the Environmental Health and Safety Manager for Tykert, and I'm here to say that we've worked very closely with the local air district on these changes. We've also worked with CAPCOA and ARB through our trade association at the statewide level to ensure that these changes do not disrupt business excessively. So while we're still concerned about some of the changes that OWEA has suggested, you know, the district has been very responsive to any of our concerns, and in the end, we all want to protect public health. So I just wanted to let you know that they have worked closely and that we're good with the changes that they've made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. With that, I don't have any director signed up to speak.
I'll move to close the public hearing and move the item.
Okay. We have a motion from Mr. Guerra and a second from Director Terry. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? All right. Motion passes. I have no one else signed up to speak. I don't have any directors who wish to comment, so at this time I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.